On Valentine's Day several years ago, I went on a date with a guy that I was set up with by a coworker. He said he needed to stop by his apartment to change as he'd been at work all day, so I went with him. And after we got inside his apartment, he tried to kiss and fondle me. I pushed him away, but he wasn't having it, and continued by pushing me into his bedroom and onto his bed. I resisted and tried my best to push him away, but thought to myself I was not going to be strong enough to prevent this guy from, well, I was crazy scared and felt totally helpless. Just as he ripped the front of my blouse open, his roommate came in and, seeing what was happening, punched this guy in the face a few times and yelled at him to get back, which he did, luckily. The roommate took my hand and led me out of the apartment, told me this guy had been a problem before, and would I like a ride home? I said yes, actually taking another chance, but I was so traumatized all I wanted to do was get away from there. It turned out all right. This guy was really nice and saved me. I told him how grateful I was. He said he was going to report this guy, as it had happened several times while he was his roommate. Well, about 2 weeks later, I was invited to a party close to where I lived. I felt like someone was following me there, but I brushed it off as just a coincidence. Perhaps the person was even going to the same party. A couple hours later, I left the party and started driving the 2 miles home, and I noticed this large car, the one that I'd seen on the way to the party, following me. Once I took a good look, I realized it was the guy who had tried to rape me earlier. I drove as fast as I could to get away from him, not going home as I didn't want him to know where I lived. I sped onto the freeway and off again and ended up racing around the residential track trying to lose this guy. Finally, a police car puts his sirens on and the guy speeds off. The police pulled me over and I'm shaking like a leaf, asking why they didn't pursue the guy that was chasing me. They said they wanted to make sure I was okay, but I was pretty mad they didn't try to nail the guy. Luckily, he didn't know where I lived, and I never saw him again. But twice, I was so close to being hurt or worse. It taught me a good lesson. I met a guy. He seemed super charismatic, and after talking for a while, I agreed to go on a date with him. It was our first date, and it was Valentine's Day. I went over to his house to see a movie that he had acted in. He starts the movie, and I settle back to watch. I was in film school, and the guy, Nick, he told me that he wanted my professional opinion. We're 5 minutes into the movie when Nick reaches for the remote and says, "Let's fast forward to my part." I reply that in order to adequately critique the movie, I should see it from the beginning. Nick assures me that his scene is self-contained and needs no context. A fight scene plays. Nick pauses and asks, "What do you think?" I look confused and Nick says, "Did you miss me? Let's play it again." I watch the scene again, but still can't make out Nick. Nick rewinds, plays, and pauses. "There I am," he says, gazing fondly at the screen. Except the screen was gray. No actors, no landscape, nothing but gray snow. "What do you think?" he asked, his eyes never leaving the empty screen. At that point, I realized Nick was crazy. "That's great," I said, "but look at the time. Time sure flies when you're having fun." Nick was still staring at the screen with a strange little smile. I stood up. Nick stood up, now not smiling. "You're not going anywhere," Nick said. It's funny how fear works. I've found that in times of danger, adrenaline supersedes fear. I managed to trick Nick. At first, it was by hiding from him within the very home. Since he was blocking the door while calling for me, I I knew it wasn't an option. Instead, I made my way from room to room, finally the master bedroom, which connected to a bathroom with a separate entrance. I sat in that room for almost an hour, and I knew Nick hadn't moved from his position at the front door. Then, after some time, I decided that I would just make some noise. He would have to investigate, and once he did, I'd run out the other entrance of the bathroom, and after more than an hour of suspense, I was finally able to escape Nick in that very way. Turns out it wasn't even Nick's place. He'd taken me to a house of someone that he'd ripped off in a drug deal. I'm very wary now of going to a guy's home unless I know him extremely well.